Good morning. Welcome to this week's edition of Tech Tuesday. You'll have to pardon me a little this week. I'm getting over a cold, so if I sound a little congested, it's just the way it is sometimes. So this week, we're going to go ahead and go over email. The main point of email is that knowing which email address to use and which fields you want to put your email address in so that the system can use it as well as possible as far as sending out email. So just to give you a little background, whenever you process a lead or send out an email blast or an email campaign or something like that through the DeltaNet, what the system will do is our email servers will send out an email on behalf of your address. So you want your address to be something that we can send on behalf of. Now the confusing part of that is basically we send out an email, and if you have a Gmail address entered, for example, an email will come out from our server, and that email will be your campaign email or your email blast or just your lead processing email when you go in to process a lead, and it'll show the from address as your Gmail address. So a recipient will probably check with Google or with Gmail to see if our mail servers are allowed to send email on behalf of that address or that kind of address. If they find out that we aren't, it increases the chance that they'll bounce it back as spam. So the way you want to get around that is you want to use an email address that's through your own company domain email. So for example, if the system were sending out email on behalf of Delta Group, so if I put in a deltagroup.com email, then the email that goes out from our system will check with our custom domain deltagroup.com, and because we control that domain, we'll put the information in there so that our servers are authorized to send on its behalf. Therefore, it won't get bounced back as spam, or at least won't get bounced back for that reason. But if we were to do the same thing and use like a Yahoo email address, then it would check with deltagroup.com or it would check with yahoo.com and bounce back the email because we're not authorized to send from yahoo.com. So if you're not confused enough, we'll go on from there. I'll show you where you can enter your email addresses, and basically you can have an email address that's used as the from address on those outgoing emails, but get your lead notices at a different address too, and I'll also show you how to do that. So let's go into the DeltaNet, and we'll see I'm on the welcome page to start off with. If we go up to the website tab and down to overviews, this is where you can set up your public email address. So this is the email address that the system will try to use as the from address on all those emails. So you'll see I have mine set as a Delta Group address. So if our servers send email, they'll say it's coming from deltagroup.com. We control that domain so it doesn't get bounced back. If I had Yahoo in this, a Yahoo or a Gmail or an AOL email address in this field, then that would increase the chance of it being bounced back by whoever receives it. I guess the most important part of that is, this is entirely up to the recipient. So this is something that's out of our control. We send these out, and if it's going to a recipient that doesn't check as to whether or not we're authorized to send from that domain, then it won't make any difference. It won't matter what address you have there. If they're not checking, then they'll always go through. But mainly if they're using another Yahoo or Gmail or AOL, if that's who you're sending to, if that's who your customer's address is, then those are the ones that are going to be most likely to get bounced back because they're always checking. So that's the main function of this field. So the important thing to remember there is you'll want to use something through your company's domain or through your own custom domain if you have your own custom domain. And it's also something that looks more professional. If you're sending out an email, I have wolfarth.net is a domain that I have. So if I were using harley@wolfarth.net, I mean, that's a custom domain, and you can tell that that's part of my brand. That has to do with me. But if I'm sending out my business emails from a yahoo.com address, then it takes out that custom branding. And anything like that just helps you to look a little bit better in the eyes of the consumer. So the main point of this public email address field is that this is your from address field, basically, is the way to look at it. So this is what your email addresses or your emails going out by the system are coming from. But you can receive your email or receive your lead notices at a different address. So if we go up to Leads and Contacts and down to Settings, this Send Lead Notices to address, now I have the same address in here, but the main point of this field is that you can override whatever your public email address is, but just for lead notifications. So if I have a Gmail address entered in this field, now what this will do instead is any email that goes out by the system, so any of those campaign emails or MarketWatches, Home Finders, anything that goes out on my behalf through the DeltaNet is going to use that public email address as the from address. But anytime a customer comes to my website and submits a lead, that notification is going to come to me at this address. So that way, you can have an email address that you use as your public-facing address. So that's the email they'll see when they get an email from the system. And that's the one you'll use that you want to make sure doesn't get bounced back. But if you still get most of your email and still handle most of your email through something like Gmail or Yahoo or whatever, you can enter that as your lead notice address. And then the system will send all your lead notifications there so that you're mainly handling things through your main email, but you still have that public email where set as your custom domain email so that it doesn't get bounced back. All right, so then the next thing I wanted to cover in this is if we go to website and down to domains, now this is where you would normally set up your custom domains. So I just wanted to look over this page because this has to do with a way that you can manually set what those from addresses are. So if we take a look at wolfarth.net, that's the custom domain that I have set up, and you would have all your domains listed out here. What you can do, if you have any custom domain set, is go up to the More tab, down to Preferences, and down to Domain/Email Display. Now this will allow you to manually set what email address the system uses as your from address and what it uses for the links in these emails for all the different kinds of emails that go out on your behalf. So if you find out that the system is sending out email and it's getting bounced back, usually if Yahoo bounces back an email because it doesn't pass that check, it'll say email returned for policy reasons or email bounced back for policy reasons, something like that. So if you're getting that error and you don't want to change your public email address, you could go in here and modify these fields to act as the from address on emails that go out. You can put any email you want here, and this is what the system will use as that from address. So if you put an email address here that's through a custom domain, so if I wanted to do one through my own custom domain for Home Finder emails, I could put that email address in. So it'll use this in the from field. It'll check against wolfarth.net to find out if the system's authorized to send on behalf of that domain. I don't have any records entered for this domain, but let's assume that I did have some entered that would authorize email from these servers. And it'll find out that it passes that check and it won't bounce it back. So even though this email address doesn't really exist, it's not going to bounce back the email because our servers are authorized to send on behalf of this domain. Now, one thing to keep in mind with that is ideally you want to have a valid email address here, because now if the customer replies, the customer could be replying, well, if they type in your email address, because they'll see this as their from address, they could think that this is your valid email address. If they type it in and try to send an email to it, it's not going to work because the email address doesn't really exist. So that's why you would want to use a valid email address here. So just to sum things up here and make sure there's, and try to alleviate as much confusion as I've created over the last 10 minutes. Under Website and Overviews, the public email address is what will go out as the from address on all of the emails sent on behalf of the system. That email address will or should be set as a custom domain email, either through your own domain if you have one, or through the company domain if you don't, and if your company provides email addresses. But if you wanted to use your own Gmail address as the email address that you get all your lead notifications and as your primary email address, you can set that under Leads and Contacts and Settings. So now you'll get all your lead notices at one address, but all the leads sent out from the system, or all the emails sent out by the system, will go out on behalf of that public address through that custom domain, so that they don't get bounced back by any of your customers' emails. All right. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions on this one. As always, feel free to comment on the videos, and you can get a hold of us. Give us a phone call at 866-233-9833, or send us an email at support@deltagroup.com, and we'll be happy to answer any questions about this or anything else. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thanks a lot, and see you next week.